Hello, my name is Allison Herschede. I'm a registered nurse and a certified diabetes care and education specialist, and I'm also a person who's been living with type 1 diabetes for almost 43 years. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 1981, and at that time, we had available porcine insulin, which is insulin that's made from pigs. That very year, human insulin was released, human regular and MPH, which I was quickly moved to. And we also had the first glucose meter released that year as well. So I was very lucky when I was diagnosed, I feel. At that time, diet was a very large part of diabetes management. Due to the insulins that we had, I was put on what they called an exchange diet, which was calorie based, and it was broken up into what they called exchanges. There were meat exchanges, fruit exchanges, starch exchanges, bread exchanges, etc. And you got so many exchanges every day, and this would be made in an attempt to match your insulin dose, and not the other way around like we do today with basal and bolus insulin. So this meal plan was pretty restrictive. There was no sugar allowed, candy was not allowed, cake was not allowed. And growing up, I felt pretty restricted and started rebelling in my teens. By the time I was 19, I had stopped testing my blood sugar. I was only injecting my basal insulin, and I was basically just eating whatever I wanted. And therefore, my blood sugars were very out of control. In 2000, I started on an insulin pump with rapid acting insulin with Humalog, which afforded me a lot more freedom than I had previously been allowed. I was told I could eat whatever I wanted, and I only had to cover the carbohydrates with insulin. And this felt like I was let out of prison. But I soon learned that this didn't work as well as I had been told it would. I was still having high blood sugars after my meals, despite counting my carbohydrates perfectly, and despite adjusting my insulin to carb ratio. I would see highs or lows. Sometimes I might get my bolus perfect, and then another time I would go high and another time I would go low. And I later learned this is because fast-acting carbohydrates and rapid-acting insulin are very hard to match up due to their action profiles. And type 1 diabetes really breaks down to being a disease of carbohydrate intolerance. So we don't metabolize properly the very macronutrient that we're told to focus on. So in 2010, at the age of 30 years old, I was taking 15 prescription medications. I was taking medications for hyperlipidemia, high cholesterol, or for hypertension or high blood pressure. I was taking medications for depression, for sleep, for the frequent infections that I encountered, and the list just goes on. I was also overweight and sick very often. I was always tired. So I'd made a drastic life change that year and just completely changed my diet. So my diet now focuses on whole foods. I focus on protein, on non-starchy vegetables, on nuts and seeds, and maybe some berries. Some people tolerate them, others don't. Maybe some dairy. And in doing so, this has enabled me to normalize my blood sugars, to bring my A1C down into the non-diabetic range, and to hopefully optimize my outcomes as a type 1 diabetic. The American Diabetes Association has identified low carbohydrate and very low carbohydrate eating patterns as options that can achieve improved outcomes in adults with type 2 diabetes. But as a type 1 diabetic, I can tell you that therapeutic carbohydrate reduction has greatly improved my life and my quality of life. So I think that nutrition is so greatly important in the management of type 1 diabetes, despite what we're told about eating whatever we want. And I think if we can reevaluate how diet affects outcomes in type 1 diabetes, we can make massive improvements.